Come on in, bestie. Welcome to Storypod, where we do the doing of story development together. Brought to you by Creative BFF. Welcome, friend. Welcome. It is so good to be with you again for this episode of the podcast. Please forgive me if you can hear my chair squeaking. It's squeaky. Okay. If you can hear it squeaking behind me, please forgive me. If you can hear any noise outside, please forgive me. Welcome back to the Storypod podcast, where we put in those reps to build our storytelling muscles so that when it comes time to lift the weight, to do the heavy lifting of writing our own stories, listen, we've built the foundation so that we can approach it with confidence, joy, excitement, all of the good things. So today, I have a question for you. If you have a character who is too smart for their own good, how can you scare them? I think we need to go back in time to before their intelligence was developed. But anyway, before we get into that, welcome. If you have any questions, story questions, if you need some help, please feel free to reach out to me. I love answering story questions. It's fun to me. It's one of my favorite things. You can contact me. I'm doing a whole lot with my hands. I'm doing a whole lot with my hands right now. You can contact me through my website at creativebff.com. You can go to the contact section, or you can shoot me an email at ash@creativebff.com. Looking forward to hearing from you, girl. But until then, we're back in these Reddit streets. Okay, listen, I have some other content coming that takes, more work, but it's also fun. So I'm excited about bringing these other videos to you, these other podcast episodes to you. But listen, answering questions is still the bread and butter. Okay, this is still how we're building these muscles. So as I mentioned at the very beginning, just a few moments ago, the question today deals with scaring an intelligent character. So I'm going to read the question. You know the deal, girl. I have to avert my eyes to find the question on my screen. So here's the question. Help scared intelligent character on the r/character development subreddit. The poster is Thin Appointment 9195. Hello, everyone. An extremely intelligent main character now finds himself alone in a city of horrors. Everyone's gone and he has to survive by himself. My intention was for him to develop from a scared, snobbish brat to a deep, matured, and powerful personality who literally holds the sky for humanity. Now, here's where I have an issue. If the character is intelligent enough to figure his way out of the horror elements of the city, how do I get him scared? Okay, so I feel like that's number one, I feel like that's an interesting story premise. If I wasn't allowed to watch horror stuff, if I did not allow myself to partake in horror stuff anymore, I would definitely want to read that book. So my initial thought, first and foremost, before I start answering the question, put it down below in the comments, wherever you're watching or listening to this. Let me know how you would approach this question, because the point of us doing these exercises together is to, like I said, build those muscles, start working our brain on some ideas that maybe are not our personal ideas, but that can, get juices flowing, and then help us when we encounter issues like this in our own stories. So I'm first and foremost, my first thought when I read the question was to root the fears in a time before his adult, I don't know how old this character is, but his, more matured, more adult intelligence was developed. So, because what I'm thinking, what I'm imagining, what I'm assuming, and I could be wrong, so let me know if I'm wrong, if you know a lot about psychology and things like that. But what I'm thinking is that fears that are planted, seeded, rooted, and developed in childhood, I feel like go beyond our adult intelligence, right? So you can plant some fears in him that came from childhood that may seem irrational. I think that intelligence, this is again just my thought that intelligence doesn't necessarily preclude, is that the right word? Doesn't necessarily preclude you from experiencing fear, especially maybe not that initial jolt, that first kind of primal physical reaction, emotional reaction of fear. Then after that emotional reaction of fear, then maybe you're like, okay, now I'm letting my grown up developed brain see my way through this, talk myself out of the fear. But I think that we, regardless of how intelligent we may be, will still have an initial reaction of fear. And I think it also could also be found in where is this person's intelligence, because there are different types of intelligence. Again, I could be 100% wrong, but what I'm thinking, okay, is that there are more than one type of intelligence. You can be really, really smart, knowledgeable, well-rounded, or well-versed rather is what I'm trying to say, in a particular area, and you definitely have intelligence in that. But in another area, you have no idea at all. So, for example, perhaps, a character who is a really experienced soldier type, who has been in combat situations, who is a great strategist, that's where their intelligence, their wisdom, and their knowledge, their breadth of knowledge lies. They would approach a situation and have a different they would approach a situation differently than someone who is, for example, a brilliant mathematician. So being a mathematician, you are super intelligent, maybe you're great at puzzles and problem solving and, other things that you're brilliant at, but, you saw a zombie movie as a kid, and so zombies still scare the crap out of you. Especially, here's the thing. Of course, it's going to depend on what the horrors of the city are. But if it is like supernatural monster type stuff, you can be intelligent. And if you're coming from a world where your intelligence has told you those things don't exist because you've just played them in video games, you've just watched them in movies, things like that. But now you're thrust into a world where, oh snap, these monsters are real. And also, oh snap, I'm alone here. There's no one to lean on. Like, that is scary. It doesn't matter how smart you are, because your smarts, you're coming from a world where that stuff doesn't exist. So you can rationalize, like, oh, if you hear a bump in the night, your first initial response might be, oh, is it a ghost? Or whatever. But if you don't believe that ghosts exist because your experience of the world and your intelligence, perhaps in the realm of science or whatever, or even in religion or whatever the case may be, wherever you're intelligent, tells you that there's no concrete evidence for a ghost or a vampire or a zombie or whatever existing. So you can rationalize yourself out of the fear and say, oh, it's probably just, somebody outside bopping around, or, the wood of my house creaking, settling, whatever the case may be. But now you're in a world where you're looking down an alley and there is a zombie coming towards you. It makes you can no longer use the rationalization that these things don't exist in my world, so I don't have to be afraid of them, right? So I think that would be my answer. Let me see if there's anything else. So the poster said that they wanted this character to develop from a scared, snobbish brat to a deep, matured, and powerful personality who holds the sky for humanity. So that initial description of, okay, so they are, I guess the question is, how do I make them scared? I want them to be scared and snobbish, but they are intelligent. So I need to find a way to make them scared so that they can be scared in their snobbishness. So that would be my answer. To make an intelligent character scared in a world where you would assume that their intelligence would, well, not where you assume, but where their intelligence does allow them to work their way out of, or best, defeat or, basically work their way out of the horrors of the situation, the city that they're in. I would say maybe primarily first, determine what type of intelligence they have. Where are they intelligent? Because that, I think, is going to affect what types of things scare them. And then once you have determined what type of intelligence they display, where their skills are, then I would root their fears in childhood, because it's harder when you have a fear that's embedded in childhood. That kind of, I think, takes you outside of not human, children are human, adult rationalizing yourself out of fears. So those would be the two ways that I would start, because I don't think that being intelligent means that you don't get scared. Then seeing how that character reacts after the initial jolt of fear. How do they react to the fear? Because, even a soldier, the soldier archetype that I mentioned earlier, they could still have a fear reaction depending on what's being presented to them. But how they respond to that fear, it may not be like they initially run away. They may not jump and scream and shout and cry, but they can still feel the fear. Also, side note, for that type of character, that fear doesn't necessarily have to be rooted in childhood. It could, but it could be rooted in experiences in war, maybe that they had as a greenhorn, basically, when they first started out. So maybe it's not even just root the fear in childhood. Maybe it is root the fear in a time when they were not as mature and developed in their intelligence, so that it can be a more primal response, a more emotional response that goes beyond their head and their ability to talk themselves out of the fear. So I think that that's my answer, but what is your answer? That's a quick one today. Oh my goodness. She's getting more efficient. Perhaps. I don't know. You guys know I like to talk, but I feel like that one was a relatively quick one to answer. And of course, it's going to depend on, what the specific horrors and, the setup of the story, the world building, all that good stuff. Like I say all the time, it depends. It depends, girl, on what you're doing in your story. But anyway, thank you for joining me for today's quick and to the point, sort of, episode of the podcast. Please let me know, how would you approach this if you have a character who either their intelligence or something else about them would cause them to not respond in whatever circumstance the way you would want them to respond, the way you would need them to respond for the good of the story, so that you can have them grow from that point on. How would you handle that? Or just specifically, how would you handle this particular question? I'm very interested to hear what your answer would be. Because listen, we're putting in these reps. You got to do the reps too. I'm not just the only one out here working out. You got to work out too. And then let me know how your session was. Anyway, love you. As always, see you next time. Be well, be safe, drink water, get some sleep. Bye.